Welcome back, everybody, to the Calaveria podcast, your one-stop shop for all things supernatural. I'm your host, Jose.
And I'm your host, Samantha.
And that's right, everybody. We are back with a brand new episode, later than usual, as always, but you guys already know the deal. We were planning on releasing an episode in September, but just the way things are going, midterm season, I'm sure most of you guys probably know what we're talking about. Or for those of you with kids, you guys know what's going on, right? And yeah, I mean, we've been pretty busy, but nonetheless, we are back and it is officially spooky season, right? This is October, this is Halloween time, and whenever this episode comes out, Halloween is going to be just around the corner. I hope many of you guys are indulging in, the different spooky festivities, whether it's watching these scary movies or
going to the pumpkin patch. I know it's been hot recently. It's definitely been like a hot fall, I would say. But, still having like those fun outside activities that you typically have during spooky season.
Yeah, it has been very hot, especially this specific, like, at the time of recording this, today was very, very hot for whatever reason. I know in the past years it tends to get cooler, but it's kind of been all over the place, which, I mean, global warming, right? But nonetheless, I mean, there's plenty of like spooky things out there to, indulge in. And I know recently I have been, Samantha, I don't know if you've noticed this, but like for those of you that have access to Disney Plus, Goosebumps has made a return. Disney actually did like a reboot of Goosebumps, and it's no longer like an anthology series like how the original like Goosebumps stories, based off the books used to be, where like every episode was like based off of, a certain book. In this case, it's like a whole series. I don't think the entire season's out. They just kind of released the first 5 episodes of it, like I think on the 13th. So be sure to check that out if you guys haven't, if you guys have access to that and you haven't watched it already. I've been watching it; it's pretty good. So just to give like a little rundown, basically, it's centered in a small little town, right? And it has like this backstory of this kid. Something tragic happens to him, and it's like his spirit is coming back, and you can see the references to the books, the R.L. Stein, right? The Goosebumps books, and it's pretty good. I recommend that for everybody. At the time of this recording, Latino Heritage Month has been coming to the end, right? It ended actually just a couple of days ago, but for most of us, I think I said this last year, right? Latino Heritage Month is every single day. It's year round. It's our whole lives, and so like it's never too late to celebrate Latino or Latinx creators or just anybody in general, right? Businesses, right? So I just wanted to put that out there. I know we didn't necessarily get an episode out there, but I mean, this is a perfect time, especially with all the different festivities going on, right? We have like Dia de los Muertos coming up and all this stuff for everybody to just kind of go out there and support. And, on top of that, I did want to mention that we were featured on Apple Podcasts for Latino Heritage Month. So Samantha, like, what was that like?
I thought it was pretty crazy, I remember when you brought it to my attention, we saw like an uprising in listeners and like just people paying attention to our podcast, and it was very exciting just seeing like as each day went by, just more and more listeners and more of you guys just coming in and listening to us talk about like the spooky and like supernatural stuff. It was very exciting. What about you?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It was crazy. Like we are still, a relatively small podcast, right? We are an independent podcast, I guess you could say, right? Well, obviously we are not with some recording, company or anything like that. So like we do this on our own time, hence why we have such an irregular upload schedule and all this. And we cover the things that we find interesting that we hope, others will find interesting. We love to share with you guys. So it was so refreshing to see that we had so many more like listeners, right? Like a ton of listeners. Like I did not expect to see this many people find us for one. And I just want to say a huge welcome to all of our new followers. Even if you weren't following just on like Apple, if you followed us from Spotify or any other like podcasting app, welcome. And I just hope you guys enjoy our episodes to come and enjoy this episode today. Um, it's sort of like cringy, I would say. Like I thought like, oh man, I would look at like the feed, right, and see people are listening to like our first episode or one of our like first couple episodes, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope they don't like,
Yeah.
I hope that's not the first episode they listen to and then just get turned away, because I promise you it gets better. I feel like we've evolved over time, and although I mean we're still trying to get better. I hope that didn't deter people too much. With all that being said, I mean, just again, a huge welcome to all of our new listeners. I hope you guys stick around and enjoy the podcast. But Samantha, so we've got all these announcements out of the way, right? Let's get into the spooky stuff. The past couple of months, right, or at least a month or so, there's been a lot of like things in the headlines, a lot of spooky things in the headlines. And one in particular that stood out to me, which I've been dying to talk about, is the fact that there are these Mexican aliens. And I know you know what I'm talking about. They did like this whole press conference to unveil these like Mexican aliens, and they literally showed what was, purported to be a alien, and it literally looks like a little human, right? Like a humanoid creature. And this made like the internet went up in an uproar, right? They were all talking about like it's a lot of speculation, a lot of memes too to go along with it. A lot of people, saying like, well, is this real or is this not real? And a lot of people saying, yeah, I knew it, and what does this mean for us now? It's just a whole lot of speculation. So, what are your thoughts?
I remember when I first saw it, it was kind of just people talking about how, like, just like a quick TikTok, possibly someone like just showing it in the background while they're being like, what the heck? Like, oh, aliens just got real. Like, this is how they look. A lot of people making fun of how small they looked as well. And I thought, to me, immediately, I was just like, what the heck? Like, this is just so random. just like, just a random month, like in the month, Mexico was like, oh yeah, we have some aliens that we want to show you guys. Like, I was just so confused and I didn't know like to believe it or not. Like they look like statues to me, and it could be because like possibly they're mummified or like they obviously did something to them to try and keep them in the best form they could, but I was shocked and I just didn't know what to do or believe. What about you?
Yeah, they definitely did look like preserved in a sort of way. Like they looked very stiff. Like if you were to, kind of bend their arm, it'd like snap off. But like, yeah, I really don't know what to believe. I don't have an opinion here. I think it's nice to see that like people are talking about these sorts of things, right? It's like whether it's fake or not, I have no opinion there. But like, it's just like really funny. Like it was like a funny moment, like a cultural moment where everyone's just like, "What the fuck is happening?" like, what, like you said, why did
Uh-huh.
Mexico just drop aliens on us?
Yeah.
Like, like what's going on? But hey, I mean, let us know your guys' thoughts. What did you guys think? When you saw this, or if you haven't seen this, be sure to Google it, TikTok it, YouTube it. I mean, there's going to be everywhere. Let us know your thoughts.
A friend of mine had told me in the news that she saw that just recently. I want to say possibly like a week ago at most, from like the time we're recording this, that there has been a really big Bigfoot sighting, and that there's even like photos and there's like a video. Obviously, with each sighting of Bigfoot, it's a really bad video, and I'm trying to find it for us to watch, but just from the photos, like you could barely make it out. But the guy that had seen it, and like the people he was with, they all are just believers. They're like, no, like it can't be a human, it can't be a monkey, it can't be a gorilla. It looked different. It looked completely different. It walked differently, but it also walked like a human, but not like enough like a human. Like I was reading the New York Times article about it, and these people are just convinced Bigfoot is real. Like Sasquatches are real. And I don't know if you had heard about it or not.
No, actually, okay. So as you're telling me this right now, I'm looking it up, and yeah, I would say like if most people I would imagine have seen the original footage of like Bigfoot, that very blurry, grainy footage. I don't remember exactly when it was filmed, but like, back in the day when obviously cameras weren't the best quality. But this video it does look, more clear, but like, I have no idea whether this is something that's real or if this is somebody that just decided, you know what, like, oh, I know there's gonna be people here, like, let me just see if I can get a reaction out of somebody. But no, it's interesting. Like, I mean, now we got aliens, Bigfoot. Like, what's gonna be next? What are we gonna find out tomorrow or next week? Right? Like, it just
Uh-huh.
seems like all this stuff is ramping up. Like, they know it's Halloween time coming up. Like, we just gotta just release everything. Yeah, I mean, with all that being said, This is going to be our episode for the month of October. We also do plan on releasing a Halloween episode for you guys, so be on the lookout for that. And also, I mean, we may have a little, I guess, surprise coming out, right? We'll be sure to let you guys know exactly when that is, but just be on the lookout for that. So, yeah. So, we have this episode and we have a Halloween episode for you guys as well. But if there's nothing else, let's go ahead and introduce today's topic. And that is the Panteón de Belén.
Located in Guadalajara, Mexico, the Panteón de Belén is a widely known cemetery that originally opened up way back in the year 1848. The cemetery was actually originally named Panteón de Santa Punta, but it found its new name from the street it was located on, Belén. This cemetery once held the resting spots for some of Mexico's most historical figures, and alongside many of the locals in the area. The way the cemetery was set up is that it had two sides in its catacombs, one with the many important figures, and the other housing the common people's tombs. Roughly 50 years later, the cemetery would close down on November 1st, 1896. After its closure, the locals' area of the cemetery would then be removed in order to make room for a hospital. You could imagine how many of these spirits felt with their resting site being disturbed. Much later after closing, in 1952, many of the historical figures' graves were relocated to Rotonda de los Jaliscienses Ilustres. Nowadays, the Panteón de Belén is a museum visited by many tourists hoping to experience its renowned ghost tour.
All right, so now that we know a little bit more about the history of the Panteón de Belén, let's get into some of the renowned ghost stories that are from there. And before we get into this, I do just want to say a big trigger warning for death of children and just, death in general, right? We are talking about a panteón, which is a cemetery. So there's going to be, obviously that's just surrounded by death. So I just want to put that out there for those of you who, may need it. So just take care of yourselves, right? One of the most well-known legends stemming from the Panteón de Belén is that of a vampire tree. It is said that sometime during the mid to late 1800s, the people of Guadalajara began to notice something strange. Something had been attacking the various animals in the area, including livestock and cats and dogs. This went on for quite some time, but there was something about the state the animals were left in that baffled the people of Guadalajara. It wasn't bad enough that people's livelihoods were quite literally being killed along with their beloved pets. The poor animals were left seemingly devoid of blood. All of this taking place sometime from sundown to sunup. But what was it? That was the question the people were left to ponder, and their worries only strengthened when the same fate fell upon the newborn children in the area. It was safe to say that they were under attack. But again, by what? That's what they set out to find out. Enough was enough for the people of Guadalajara. They would not sit around while their innocent children and beloved animals were taken from them. It was then that they formed a sort of vigilante group dead set on capturing what they came to believe to be a vampire. Differing accounts state that the group rounded up what they believed to be a group of suspects and narrowed their list down by the one that appeared to be the most vampiric. They based their selection on the paleness of their skin and vampiric features, all until they settled upon one man. Another version tells of the group setting up a trap of some sort until they finally captured the monster terrorizing their community. In either case, the so-called vampire was dragged to the Panteón de Belén, where they drove a stake through its heart, putting an end to its reign of terror. Fearing that it may return one day, the people buried the vampire and covered it with a large and heavy stone. At last, the vampire was slain and the killing stopped. But this wasn't the end of the strange occurrences. Soon after killing and burying the vampire, many began to notice that the stone slab was cracked, and traces of the stake used to kill the vampire were now protruding those very cracks. As legend has it, a tree began to grow on the tomb where the vampire was buried, and has remained there for over 200 years. The legend doesn't end there though. If you were to cut the tree's trunk or break one of its branches, blood will begin to flow. Most eerily, many believe that one day the slab will break completely, and when it does, the vampire will awaken and seek revenge on the people of Guadalajara. So, that is the story of the vampire of Guadalajara and the vampire tree. So, what do you think, Samantha?
I remember hearing about this tree before, and I just remember hearing about like the vampire tree, like in the cemetery. But I didn't know the story about how supposedly like the tree grew from the stake that was stabbed in the vampire's heart. Like to me, like that was completely wild. And if like that is true, I wonder, just kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah, see, I don't know either. I don't, I'm neither a believer or a denier. I'm on the fence about this sort of stuff, but like, this tree is there though, right? Like, you can see it. We will share pictures of it on our Instagram, so be sure to check that out. But this tree is very, very old, and you can tell that it is growing over like stone or cement or whatever, and it actually is fenced off now, which it kind of like feeds into the legend of like, okay, this is supposed to be protected because we don't want this vampire to get out. And the whole like idea of it like bleeding if you like break off a branch or cut off like the stump or something, it's very eerie, right? Like, I wouldn't want to be the person to like go over there and try it, and then now I just released a curse on like the whole city, and it's
Yeah,
just like, yeah, I don't want to be the one to be responsible for that.
I wouldn't want to be either.
But again, yeah, like we heard about this story from our tia, and I mean, just the fact that like our family or like our dad's side of the family is actually from Jalisco, and we have family who are from Guadalajara. I think that's why it's pretty prevalent story that you hear from there, and the Panteón is actually like a pretty famous cemetery there, or Panteón there, or even in general, like in Mexico. But there actually are different variations of this story, and I just wanted to touch on a little bit of those. So other variations of the story sort of tell of like a European man that is like there, right? And when these killings start happening, they quickly suspect it's him because he's sort of like an outsider. He is said to be dressed in like all black, and with the whole idea of like that trap, right? So like that where that part of the story comes in this variation, it's that okay, the trap was set for him. And I don't remember exactly what they said. I don't know if like the sources that I read talked about it actually putting like an animal or a human as the trap, but like they were able to sit there and find that it actually was this European man that they suspected all along. And in the same, in these different variations, they end up killing him the same way, right? It's the stake that drives through the heart. Some variations say that like they go to like sort of like a spiritual leader of some sorts, right? To ask them, well, how do we get rid of it? And that's where they tell them, you need to drive a stake through this heart. I'm not a very scientific person. I know you are. Obviously, I think most people would realize this. Like, this may be like a very dumb statement, but like, sort of makes sense, right? Like, you drive a stake into whatever, right? And then you essentially plant it in the ground. It may grow. Like, it may grow. Like, I know that's not how things work, but like, it's interesting to see that like from death you get this tree wherever it came from. But like the tree itself, again, it looks scary. Like, it looks like it would house a vampire.
From like my knowledge of plants and kind of just being like a bio person in general, a stake used to like kill someone or anything should not grow into a tree at all. Doesn't matter if there's blood. It purely has to be, to me, like if that were to happen, like that's all supernatural. Basically, for a plant to grow after planting it, it would need some type of roots, even just like a small little cell of roots, just to be able to like dig into the dirt and get nutrients. But what I'm guessing is from just that person, either the vampire or the guy, whoever it was, their not really their nutrients, like their blood or anything like that, but just like their evilness or whatever. I'm pretty sure that's probably what fueled it if this story were to be true, if we were to believe it.
Right. I mean, and even then, right, I don't think we've studied vampires enough to know what's in their blood, or, so like for all we know, it could be rich in nutrients. Okay, so that was one of the most well-known stories there, or one of the more well-known. There's also another story that I'm going to get into here, and this one is called Nachito's Grave. It's May 24th, 1882. A 10-year-old boy by the name of Ignacio Torres Altamirano, or Nachito, is extremely afraid of the dark. His parents would have to always place two lit torches just outside his window and leave it open for him so that he could see the light as he drifted to sleep. This night in particular would be very different. His parents placed the torches just as they always did, but it did not help that a massive storm was set to hit Guadalajara that night. They had no idea it was approaching, so without any hesitation, they put Nachito to bed. As one may suspect, the storm blew out the torches as it crept on the city. The next morning, Nachito's mother entered his room and instantly felt something was off. The room was so cold. She checked on her boy, only to be struck with horror. Her poor Nachito laid cold and motionless. It was later determined that he suffered a massive heart attack, likely due to his immense fear of the dark. Nachito went on to be buried in the Panteón de Belén, and it didn't take long for something strange to happen. The very next day, his coffin was seen out of its grave without any explanation. It was buried once again, and the very next day, it was out of his grave once again. This went on until his parents realized what was really going on. This was some sort of message from Nachito beyond the grave. He did not want to be shrouded in darkness, and so his parents listened. They had a new coffin made for him. This new coffin was made of stone and stood above the ground to always allow Nachito to have as much light as possible, and this seemed to work. Nachito's grave was widely known by many, and as a result, a tradition was born. Many who visit the Panteón and run across his grave leave toys for him to play with and ask him for a favor of some sort. His grave has been known to pile up with toys, and so to help with the overcrowding, the Panteón's caretakers are sure to donate the toys to the children in the nearby hospitals. There have also been claims of people seeing and hearing Nachito, and according to some sources, grave diggers have seen him playing with the toys and finding them around the graves of other children. So this story, although it is very sad, right, there is a death of a small child. It's this example of these different spirits that we've spoken about in the past, right? Like, he doesn't seem to be a harmful spirit, and I think it's very like, in the end, it's kind of like a heartwarming story where it's like, although it is very sad what happened to Nachito and his fear, like, his parents made the best of it, and many of the people of Guadalajara seem to like embrace him and kind of like show him love, years after his death. As sad as the story is, I really do like it because it seems to like show that like as people, right, we could embrace these spirits and these spirits will embrace us.
Like when I was researching all the different spirits and like legends at this cemetery, I kind of like realized, as like scary as cemeteries like usually are like depicted, there are definitely a lot of nice spirits or like nice stories that came after, like basically after someone's passing. Like, sure, these people, they passed away possibly and from a horrible sickness or whatever, like Nanchito, he passed away from a heart attack because he was so scared of the dark. But even after their passing, they're able to like help people or just bring life to others and bring happiness to people even after their passing. And I know with my stories that I'm going to be talking about, some pretty nice ones, definitely a lot more heartwarming than the vampire one that you first mentioned. But it's really nice to hear that there are spirits that definitely aren't harmful in any way.
Yeah, and I think it's like it's nice to see that like his tomb is literally like shrouded in toys. Like, again, we'll share pictures of this. Like, it's like customary for people who do visit the Panteón. They tend to take like a toy or something, right? Because they know to leave it there for Nachito. And I think it's like the fact that like the caregivers kind of like, or not the caregivers, I'm sorry, but the like grave diggers will like kind of see that like he's playing with the toys. It shows that like, okay, he's still a kid, obviously, like he's playing, and it's something like heartwarming about that, to kind of think like, okay, he's still, doing whatever he would love to do as a child. And I think it's very nice that like these individuals that work at the Pantheon will like sort of like donate the toys, because I'm telling you, like, it gets covered in toys. And so like if they were to just leave it, you wouldn't even be able to see the tomb anymore. Like it would end up like going onto other people's gravestones, and it would just be like a mess, right? It would just be an overcrowding of toys. And this is where like these other sort of like anecdotes come in from this sort of tale, right? Some people say that like if you take his toy, right? So like if you were to go there and you just take it, that he's gonna follow you home, and he will place like some sort of like pranks on you and make these weird things happen, right? Until you return them. But this tends to happen to people who kind of like are mischievous and like taking something that doesn't belong to them, right? But whereas these caretakers, right, the Panteon's caretakers, they donate it to the children in these hospitals, and there is nothing to say that like, oh, that these children are being, pranked or like haunted. It's more of these individuals who are doing this for malicious reasons, right? Like taking it just because they want to.
Yeah, he's able to like tell like obviously the difference between someone taking them to actually give to other children or just for their own benefits in any way.
Yeah, so it's really nice. If you're ever in the area, you ever visit, be sure to take a toy from Nachito. And I do want to just share some different little variations here. Some people do believe that his death was a result of a sort of curse or some like from like a demon or something, right? I'm not entirely sure if I want to subscribe to that, because it just seems like a lot more sinister. But either way, it's very tragic what happened to him. And other people think that like his death, right, was the result of actually like carelessness from his parents or some sort of babysitter who didn't necessarily adhere to like his like fears, right? They didn't leave out those torches for him in the night. But either way, the story of Nachito, it still goes that this young boy was very afraid of the dark.
Out of the many graves at the cemetery, you will find a tombstone for a doctor who passed away at the young age of 29. His name was Jose Castro. His tombstone has a symbolic etching of a grieving mother underneath a whipping willow tree. Many of Castro's former patients came to visit at his funeral to honor the young doctor and the amazing work that he did for them. Now, his story kind of continues like after his death, where many of his patients would come days, weeks, months, even years later to come visit him, basically thanking him for all the work that he did for them, and just asking him for help for any sickness they were dealing with, just kind of being there and just honoring him, bringing him gifts, and hoping that he would give them some kind of luck in their wellness journey. And because of that, many of the locals and even just people that come to visit the cemetery that are experiencing any illness, any troubles, they will come and visit Castro's grave, and they'll give him an offering and just hope that his spirits will help them on their journey to find a cure for their illness. And it kind of reminds me of like Nanchito's story, where people will leave stuff at the grave to kind of honor him and his story, because it was a young doctor and he did great work for many of the people there. But, sadly he did pass away, and it kind of just started this legend that if you're dealing with something and you need some kind of medical assistance and like you want some kind of help, they kind of come to him for like a consultation after life, some people would say, where he's able to help them, but obviously not in a direct way, just kind of like a spiritual way.
Yeah, actually, I really like it. Reminded me of one of the spirits that we actually covered in an early episode about La Planchada, where like she was sort of known, right? So for those of you who probably aren't familiar with the story or haven't heard the episode, first of all, be sure to check that out. That's our haunted hospitals, I believe it is. But La Planchada was this nurse also in Mexico, right? And she was known to be very helpful. She loved her patients, and she ended up dying, right, one way or another. And she was known to like visit the same hospital or visit different hospitals throughout Mexico. And many people report some nurse, right, this mysterious nurse they'd never seen before, kind of come, and she seemed very helpful. And they just like get well like out of nowhere. Like they just like improve in health significantly, and then they go to their actual doctors and tell them like, oh, this amazing nurse helped me, and they describe what she looked like to them, and they just be confused because nobody that worked in the hospital ever looked like that, or kind of rang a bell, sort of like giving them off, like tipping it off that like this was not somebody that worked here. So it kind of gave me those vibes, and it is nice, right, to know that this spirit is sort of like doing this for other people too, and help to like kind of like preserve his name as well.
It definitely did help to preserve his like name and like his story. Another very well-known story though is of this couple that were buried a bit farther down into the cemetery, and this couple was actually not from Mexico. Their names are Joseph Johnson and Jean Young, and they were originally from Scotland. They had arrived in Guadalajara during a time where a lot of the people were starving. Food and just regular resources were very limited. Their story starts off with coming and just seeing the people hunt down even just dogs or any animal they could really get just to eat. And they saw this and they obviously cared for these people, even though it had no relation to these people that they just barely met or anything. And they felt like we need to help these people. And so they decided to help them. We're going to provide them with food, with clothes, with anything that they need. And to do so, they decided to provide food and clothes for all of those like in need. Even well after, as the town got better and food became plentiful, many people in the town knew that if they were ever in need of help and shelter, the couple would gladly be there for them. After living a long life and helping the people of Guadalajara, Joseph Johnson sadly passed away after battling a bad disease with chloria. 4 months later, Jean Young would pass away, and they would both be buried in the Panteón de Belén. After their passing, many would often visit their grave to honor them and even ask for help beyond into the afterlife, similar to Dr. Castro. Oftentimes, visitors asking for their help will leave presents for Jean in hopes that the couple will help them. I remember when I was reading about this story, I thought it was really sweet that like kind of just like with Dr. Castro, like people are still honoring their stories and just appreciating the help that they gave the people of Guadalajara and continuing to ask for like their assistance in just their lives if they're ever going through hardships. And I'm guessing since people are still doing it, obviously some kind of luck or anything is coming their way from doing so.
Yeah, it's nice to hear that like these people, right? Like I think the way that I kind of see it is that like although these people are just kind of going to them to be like, "Oh, please help me," it's more of like the reason why. I guess I look at that like the reason why they're doing that, because these people were such great people, right? While they were alive, they had such an impact on the people and the city of Guadalajara, like basically showing like these people knew no matter what, like these are the people that helped us, get better, and like fed me when I was hungry and gave me a house when I didn't have anything, or gave me a place to sleep when I had nothing. And these people obviously didn't have to do that. They arrived in a new town. They seen the way it was. They could have just been, easily just been complicit with how things were and lived their life the best that they could and just watch everybody else suffer, which, I feel like we can see this like nowadays too, right? Many times people move into, I was thinking specifically like gentrification. They could have easily done something similar to that where they could have like lived their life as best as they could and just watched as everybody else suffered and be like, oh, well, that sucks for them. But no, they took it upon themselves to help the people because they wanted to see better for everybody, right? They felt bad for them and they did what they could, and they did a lot. So I think it's very nice that people are like doing this, like you said, honoring them after their death.
Like you were mentioning with gentrification, like nowadays, like people, they will move into like a place that's really cheap for them and they don't want to help the community around them. And it's very nice to hear that these people, they came from a whole different country, probably didn't even know the language and anything like that. And rather than just being like, oh, those aren't my people, they placed themselves inside the community and they said, we're going to help them. And just by doing that, they became a vital part and a very honored part of the community. Like they are praised still to this day. People love them for the work that they did helping during that hard time in Guadalajara.
Yeah, and I will say like you said, right? Like these weren't their people. They didn't have to, right? Like they weren't obligated to do so, but like they made it their people, right? They made these people their, like you said, their people, their family. And I think that's the thing, like us Mexicans, right? I could speak to this because, right, we are Mexican. We are we are very loving people, right? So like if you lend a hand to us, we'll be sure to show you that gratitude. And I think this is very evident here, right? Where like these people are honored well after the death, right? Like, in a sense, like they are honorary Mexicans for what they did, right? I think the people there, I don't think it'd be a stretch to say that they view them as Mexicans, right? They love them. You just as like, these are like a hero for the city. So I think this is a very nice story. But there are even more stories that come out of the Panteón de Belén. And one of them is actually about a pirate, which seems very odd, right? But let me get into it. So there once was a young man who sailed the Pacific, and he was known for attacking many ships and stripping them of their fortunes. As a result of his adventures, he maintained a large treasure. Eventually, he grew tired of this life as he grew older, and decided it was time to settle down and create a real life for himself. He decided to settle in Guadalajara and had one son. It is said that the boy never knew of his father's daring past, much less of his riches, and it would seemingly remain that way for as long as he lived. You see, one day, the father decided to bury his treasure at an undisclosed location and told no one about it, not even his son. Only a few months would pass before the man fell ill and succumbed to his sickness. He would be buried in the Panteón de Belén. But why is this worth mentioning? Well, it is said that if a devout person visits this ex-pirate's grave at midnight and prays the rosary for his soul, his spirit will appear and reveal the location of his buried treasure. Many have tried, but none seem to be worthy. Or maybe somebody out there has quietly found the long-lost treasure.
So what do you think? Do you think someone has found it? Do you think no one has found it? Would you go ahead and try?
I don't know, honestly. Now, first to me answer that one question, would I try it? No, because I know I would not get it. See, I'm not
That's
a
what I
very
was
religious
thinking.
person. So like I'm not the right person for that, for one. But I don't know. I really don't know. I don't doubt that people have tried it. Like I feel like people would really do anything these days to get rich. But I mean, hey, I don't blame them, but like I don't know. I feel like if I'd like to think that if somebody did try it and someone actually did get it, they did like the latter half on this story, right, where they did quietly just get the treasure and moved on with their lives. I don't think they'd be the type of person to just go around and flaunt it.
I'm sure, yeah, with the story, how it says someone that's, I believe, did you say righteous or what
Devout.
was devout? Someone that's like a devout, like religious person, they wouldn't really want to flaunt it. Like, I feel like they wouldn't, at least someone of that nature.
Yeah, or even on that note, actually, I mean, speaking of that, right, like that just make me wonder even more. Would a devout person really go seeking riches like that? Like, is this something that
Paradox. Where
exactly,
you,
right? Like,
mhm.
I don't think somebody, that religious or, like, I guess in tune with God would really kind of like look out for that stuff. I feel like that, like I said, I'm not religious. If I'm not mistaken, I think like greed is, one of the seven deadly sins. So I think, for a really devout person in general who needs to, for one, pray for this pirate's soul, I don't know if they'd be the person to just go out there and do that, which may be why this is part of the legend, why I guess no one has found it. It could just be that like nobody worthy enough has actually gone and tried it, and maybe they never will. And one of the last most well-known stories that come out of the Panteón de Belén is one of another young boy. One of the more disheartening legends tell of a young boy named Santiago. He was in a local hospital next to the Panteón. Santiago was said to be suffering from a grave illness, and one day, his mother stopped by for a visit. Along she brought a small figurine of a saint in order to help ease his discomfort, and as he slept, his mother slipped the figurine into his hands. When he awoke, Santiago was furious and smashed the figure against the wall. As he did, he cursed God for making him ill. He wished his very same illness upon God, and even posed the question as to who may heal God should he suffer from his same fate. Later that night, Santiago experienced the most pain he had ever felt, and for some reason, decided to leave the hospital and enter the gates of the Panteón de Belén. The very next day, Santiago was found in the Panteón, hung from a tree. He was gone. Some eyewitnesses claimed to have seen him at night hanging from the tree. Okay, like I said, this is one of the I would probably say this is one of the most disheartening ones, right? We have two children who have died in both of these stories, right? But this one just it seems very brutal. And I will say there is not necessarily like steadfast proof of this one. I don't know if I didn't hear anything about like you can go visit Santiago's grave, none of that stuff, right? So this could just lead into the fact that like for one, supposedly this story of they could say that like the little boy that lost his faith, this is what like most people like call the story, is supposed to be some sort of like way that parents would or adults would use to like scare their children into sort of believing God, right? Or like telling them like, oh, you need to be a good Catholic, a good Christian, or whatever it is, right? And I just gotta say, this is like a fucked up way to scare a kid.
It definitely is. I couldn't be imagine just like being a little kid growing up in the city and just being like, oh my god, like what if one day while I'm passing by I'm gonna see him hanging? Like that's scary.
For one, like there's ways of scaring kids in general, but like to scare a kid into believing in God this way, like that just seems like a bit too far. Like I said again, for like maybe the 100th time, I'm not religious, but I know right from wrong, and this is very wrong. And I don't think that this would be something that God would look down upon and be happy with.
It's just a very fucked up story to use just in general to try and scare a kid to do anything. Like it's sad just thinking about like a little kid just dying because he had lost his faith.
In a sense, it kind of seems like like it's supposed to be a punishment because he was angry and he cursed God. And I think that's like sort of like what people are supposed to get from it, is that like, oh, look, this is what happens when you don't believe or you denounce God. And I mean, I don't know. I don't want to speak too much on all that stuff because I don't want to offend anybody, but really, like, I think there are better ways to go about doing this, and I think this is probably the worst way to do so. But before we end off, I do want to just talk about one last story, or a sort of supposed story. So, I seen this one on a couple of sources, but there necessarily wasn't like a story to go along with it, or like a sort of like ghost story legend type thing, I guess you can call it, but it was more of like a video. So there's actually a YouTube video. I don't remember exactly when this like surfaced, but it shows like a couple in the Panteon. And now I'm just realizing it. Why the hell would there be like a married couple in a cemetery? I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe this is some sort of practice that like specific for the city. I don't know. I'm just speculating here, but I thought that was really weird. But yeah, this is like a married couple. They're there, and they're being photographed. They're like behind these steps or in front of these steps, and behind them, this monk sort of like just walks by as if like he doesn't see them there. He doesn't see that they have like some sort of like like a moment going on or something, right? But he's passing by and he's seen wearing this sort of like cross. Well, supposedly this video went viral, and supposedly the video is showing this like a ghost of a monk, and turns out that like the cross he was wearing was somehow dated to be like hundreds of years old, which I don't know how you would even get that from a video. But like I said, this turns out to be a hoax. But I think it's like it just goes to show that like the Panteon has such a like immense history, both of like historical sense and like a paranormal sense. This stuff has been going on for a very long time, and just like anything, it's no surprise that people want to sort of like be a part of the action.
So I have one question for you after learning and just obviously researching all of this. Would you go and visit this? Would you take one of their night ghost tours?
Honestly, it is very intriguing. I think I would. I know I love, like, we both love horror and all that, but like I'm a big chicken when it comes to these things, right? But I think I would. There's just something about it. I feel like there's sort of like a connection, and just kind of hearing these stories, like especially about the doctor and the I believe it's a Scottish couple, correct? Like,
Yeah, the Scottish couple.
yeah, so like about them, Nachito's grave, and it does seem like there's more good than bad out there. And I mean, who knows? I'd love to see if like we could capture something. So it'd be a very fun thing to probably do someday.
It definitely will. I know when I was reading like TripAdvisor, like reviews about the tour, people said it was really good. Like, it is a very beautiful cemetery. It has amazing architecture, people would say. And so like even if like say you don't experience anything, it's a historical site, and I bet it's still amazing to view and just visit.
Right. So with that being said, would you take the tour?
I definitely would, honestly. I would want to be there with people who are also into the supernatural, because I'd be looking for supernatural stuff. But I would definitely go.
Yeah, this is definitely something we got to do. All right, this is on our bucket list.
And to wrap up today's episode, you guys know we always have to talk about TikTok or anything spooky, really. And we after all this, we kind of want to bring some happiness. There was some dark moments in this episode, and so I found a very interesting, and I want to say very funny TikTok to me. And I did send it to you, and basically I'll describe it for you guys. But if you guys do want to check it out, we will be posting it on our Instagram for this week's episode. We do, like our posts, and at the very end, you will always find these TikToks. But in this one, it just starts off with these guys. They're talking, and like they're not talking. They're counting off in Spanish. So in the video, there's this like exercise machine that you pull down. I'm pretty sure it's to work out like your back or like some of your arms, your muscles, up there. And the thing is that it's going, right? But there's no one there. There's no one sitting down. There's nothing. And it's going like at a relatively, like, I would say like human pace. Like it's pretty obvious. Like it's not going super crazy. It's not broken or anything, but just no one is there. These people are just laughing because they're like, what the hell is going on? And they're
Yeah.
counting this ghost off, and they're hyping him up. They're like, oh, hell yeah, keep going. And it's a very funny TikTok to watch, because these people definitely know how to hype someone up. And I guess that someone today was, some ghost who just wanted to get jacked in the afterlife.
Yeah, yeah, it's really funny. Like like you said, like you hear them counting off, and it really does seem like this ghost is actually working out, because in the beginning of the video, it's moving relatively fast, and then like towards the end of it, it starts to kind of like slow down a bit, and so it seems like, damn, like this is really getting him. Like he's really he's really getting a pump in, right? Like he's getting tired. But yeah, it's really weird. And like in the beginning, again, you can see like some sort of like kid like running after a ball or something, and even he's looking like whoa, like what is that? And kind of walks away. But like it's very like heartwarming video, because all these guys are just, you can hear them in the background, and they don't sound scared. They sound happy. They're like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, like it's just very funny. It's just these people hyping up this ghost or whatever is trying to, work out. And it's funny. Definitely something you guys should check out. I think it's just a good laugh, and let us know if you guys are scientists, any physicists out there, could this have happened without a ghost? Like, is this just a possibility, I guess? Because I was trying to think of anything science related that could have caused this, but I don't know.
Yeah, it reminds me of this sort of thing I saw like growing up, like a specific like show. I can't remember exactly what the name of it was, but they went to like this supposedly haunted like playground, where this swing was just like known to always be swinging, like literally swinging as if somebody was on there, like not just like swaying back and forth, but like full on, like almost wrapping around the swing set. And I don't know. I don't remember exactly what they found, but somehow they debunked it, where there was like the magnetic fields and this and that and whatever the case may be. But like, I don't know how you would explain this one, because this is like a whole different type of movement. And like I said, it tends to slow down. So if you guys have any idea what could be happening here, let us know. And again, like Samantha said, we always post these TikToks on each week's episode post on our Instagram, and that is at calaveriapod. Also, be sure to follow us on TikTok at calaveriapod. And if you have a story that you want to share with us and maybe hear it on the podcast, be sure to send it our way at calaveriapod@gmail.com.
And if you guys have any article, any story, like my friend, just before we went to go record this, she's the one that told me about the Bigfoot sightings and sent me the article and was just like, yeah, this is just very interesting. I feel like you guys should talk about this. Like, just send it to us, guys. We love to have spooky news at the beginning of our episodes. Honestly, if you send it to us, we're going to talk about it.
Oh
Trust
yeah.
us.
Oh yeah. We've only gotten like one email before in the past, and that just I guess goes to show that we will talk about it. But yeah, I mean, we're eager to hear from like many of our new listeners. If you guys have a story or anything that you may want us to cover in a future episode, let us know. And if you guys want to support the show, be sure to leave a rating or review on any podcasting app that you are listening on. 5-star reviews always help. It helps us to get our name out there, right? To get suggested on other podcasts and all that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, it'd be a great help. And again, a huge, huge, huge welcome, huge shout out to all of our new listeners. I'm happy that you guys are here, and I hope you guys enjoy these episodes coming forward. And don't forget to check out our Halloween episode. So, if there's nothing else, we'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.
Bye.